we've talked a bit about how people come to markets. What we're going to be doing now is, when you get to the market, how do you leverage? It's very easy to arrive at a market and be overwhelmed with a number of people, with trying to get meetings. Everybody seems to know each other. And this session is, once you're there, how do you make it happen? How do you come away with relationships, with projects? Where should you be looking, and how do you twist going to the market and having a glass of rosé into money in the pocket to pay for the champagne the next time you come? So, to start off with, Genevieve,
yes.
we thought we've had a discussion, particularly from two broadcasters, talking about what they're doing traditionally. We've got new things happening in the market, as we've just heard. Somebody's just stood up and talked about the opportunities that they can see. Where do you think both the animation and the live action producers should be looking?
I think it's always good to be open to different opportunities, in that everybody will, try to make a meeting with Jackie, Darren, and all the usual suspects, and there are lots of other opportunities, in between that I think that a lot of people miss. For example, I went on a recent trip to New York, and I thought I was going to, pitch to Universal, and I pitched to them, and they said, no, not interested in any of those. Then just as the meeting was finished, they go, oh, but we do have a new service just starting up for artistic creatives, and your show Art Ninja would be perfect for that. And we're now doing a deal with that network, which is a worldwide network dedicated for people who want to do art, create art at home with some guidance. And so that was a completely unexpected deal. So I think it's important to look for the opportunities that are not in the obvious spaces. I think we were talking about, who are the new players and how do you meet them, and a lot of people go, how do I meet Amazon? How do I meet Google? How do I meet Netflix? And it is quite hard. I'd say, for Google, a lot of people are finding out who's commissioning at Google. Well, the answer is now nobody, because they had a sort of a go at the animation space and have decided to retreat from it. And they were at the time only commissioning stuff which was, mining their own IP. So looking at YouTube stars and turning those into traditional series, and they've now backed away from that. So I'd save your time on that, trying to find out who is the commissioning editor at Google, because there isn't one. With Amazon, there's quite a big team there now, but they're commissioning very little. And I think Apple are up and coming. They're going to be appointing a new person in the new year, in after Kids Screen in March, who will be looking after the older programming. And there are two people there now who are on the Kids Screen Exchange website, and probably many others who are looking after the preschool commissioning, and they're looking for what they would call saplings. So that is a place that you can go, and they're right at the beginning. I would say that Netflix now is moving much more into vertical integration. They're setting up their own animation studio. The party's over a little bit, although they are commissioning a lot. It does tend to be from the bigger producers and the known names. You'll have seen the Roald Dahl press release recently. They've acquired the whole Roald Dahl library, and they're going to do spin-offs and all that. It's really big stuff. And so if you're an independent producer, I think I'm not saying don't aim high, but there are so many opportunities out there that are not in those obvious spaces. Then I went on to LA and New York and so on, and I met at least 10 or 15 so preschool SVOD services hungry for content that is not necessarily 52 11-minute episodes, and they, I'm sure, are now commissioning smaller pieces of content. And it's very difficult when you're starting out to go to a large broadcaster and it's just you and a couple of other people, and you go, right, I'm going to making a 26 half-hour animated series. I've never done it before. Please commission my series. I'm not saying never, but largely speaking, the broadcaster might direct you, if they like your project, might direct you to a larger company who could maybe handle the logistics of getting that budget and that production together. But I would have your sort of antenna out for all of the new opportunities that are out there that may be less obvious to other producers.
So would you say that people should be looking to go to that mid-zone of the producers rather than spending all their time chasing after the people that are going to want that relationship curated?
I think it's good to take your project to market and to get feedback at different phases. So you want to take your project out when you've got a few images and an outlying concept, and then people will come back to you with feedback and say, I don't really like the balance there, the age target may be not quite right, the colour palette may be this, that and the other, and take that feedback. And usually people are all saying different things, but you will, generally speaking, get at least 6 people who are saying the same thing, and you can take that and feed it back into your project. But yes, you can. Probably, I suppose the easiest thing to do is to go to a bigger producer or a distributor, and you can sell them an option to your property, and they will help you raise the finance. So you will be there in the meetings, with all of the major broadcasters, because only you can pitch your project the best way. But you can have the support of those larger organisations who will introduce you to all those people. And it may be that first project you do with a bigger company under an option agreement, and you've only got 10% of the back end or something, but at least in that process you have met all of the big players. And so then your next project you can say, okay, well now I feel equipped to do this, to go direct, and I know all the people.
Helen, you've been out there pitching your projects.
Yeah.
What's your response to Genevieve?
In various ways. I mean, our company is both a producer and a distributor, so we do develop our own shows and go out and pitch to the broadcasters. We also distribute shows on behalf of third parties as well. It's quite interesting. I think we talked earlier about the some of the things that you need, and I think there's 3 key things for me. There's definitely passion. We talked about passion earlier on. You've got to be very passionate about your project, what you're pitching, and you've got to be passionate about the kids' business, because it's a really, really tough business to be in. And so if you're not passionate, you shouldn't be in it. You need to have the ability to persevere. These things don't happen overnight. We talked about the gap in the market. They can take 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and we have experience of that on 2 projects, which both of those projects took between 6 and 7 years from initial development to final production. So perseverance is another one, and you need to be very professional. So when you are pitching to, whether it's broadcasters or buyers, whoever it is, you need to be professional all the time. You need to know when to accept a no, graciously. You need to know when to stop, without damaging relationships. And I think Genevieve touched on something earlier on, which is quite interesting about, sort of going. It's very easy to go out and pitch and to listen to lots of people giving you lots of feedback. And I think when you're relatively new to this business, it's quite easy. And I've seen this with the project we're working on now. Is that it's very easy to go, oh, well, they said this and they said that, so we need to redevelop it and we need to change it all, and you kind of think, no, what you need to do is listen to everybody and see where there's common ground between those comments and feedback you're coming back with, and then take a view as to whether or not you feel that works for the project, whether it makes the project viable. And is it gonna deliver for the broadcaster as well, in terms of what they want? So I think a lot of it is about being open-minded, but I still think you have to be very true to your project, ultimately. And we've had experiences of that ourselves, even with years and years of doing this. On a recent project we were working on, it was partly because we were pitching to a toy company, which is a very different beast. And the feedback came back and we kind of sat there scratching our heads going, but really, have we really missed something, And it was really interesting because later on we did a bit more research and we were bang on. We knew exactly what we were doing, but it almost took us the need to doubt ourselves for a while to kind of come back and go, actually, no, we were bang on first of all. So a bit of caution when there's lots of people giving you advice. Sort of take it, think about it, put it in perspective, but you need to believe in your project above all.
So Andrew, if people, because you've been we've had various different hats on, if people understand the heart of their project and, as Helen and Genevieve said, are prepared to be flexible, so anything can come across, what do you think people need to do in order to get their eyes on the prize, which is ultimately to get the project made in a commercially successful way?
Well, I think one of the things that it's worth bearing in mind is that unless you do happen to get an SVOD sale and they say, great, we'll take the show, we'll finance it, there's pretty much no broadcaster in the world that will just give you your budget. And so I've seen a lot of situations where producers have spent a huge amount of time and effort really focusing on one broadcaster and saying, if I get my BBC sale or my this sale or that sale, that's the goal. And what the problem is that they're ultimately successful in getting that, which is amazing and fantastic and shows that they've done a great job with their creative development. But then they're completely at sea because they go, oh, but I don't even have half my budget yet. Where am I going to get the rest of the money? And they then almost start from scratch again at that point and go, oh, I now need to speak to somebody else, like a distributor or another broadcaster internationally. And I think you have to be aware that it will be very unusual to get just one partner on a project. People have talked about networking and about meeting other people. And it really is, it's there has to be a game plan behind how you would produce it, where you would produce it, how you would finance it. And all of those are relationships you have to cultivate. And, you won't have the same people working on, every project you ever do, because not every project is right for every person you work with. So it is about that networking. It's about going to the markets and meeting different people. I've got a really nice set of guys who are an animation studio in Canada that I'm hopefully about to work with, and they have a very specific style, and I brought them a project going, oh, I'd love to work with you on this show, it'd be great, I can just see how you would really bring something to it. And they went, no, we don't like that kind of stuff, that's too young for us, we like the older side of things. And it was like, oh, okay, well that's fine. And actually, it is that thing. It's horses for courses. There are some people out there who will absolutely love to work with you on the project you're pitching right now, but who won't take everything you ever do. And so every project is different, and you have to build that mosaic of relationships. And sometimes you might find that one piece of the puzzle clicks into place, and it just suddenly crystallizes the whole process. You go, great. That means that I can do this deal and this deal and this deal, because you have that first piece in place. But you can't go to market expecting that one sale will make your show work. And the problem I've often had is producers coming to me with a project and they say, great, we've got our sale, and the broadcaster wants us to start production next year. And you go, great, well, where's the rest of the money coming from? Oh, well, we haven't got that far yet. And it might have taken 2 or 3 years to get to the point where you've got a relationship and the right project for the broadcaster at the right time in their schedule, given what else they're commissioning, what their budgets are like. And if you then go back to square one with everybody else, they might have spent their money for that year, or actually you needed to have pitched it 2 years ago to be in the development process to get to the point where you're now, if you like, on their commissioning watch list. So, you have to start it all at the same time. You have to go and work out what it is that your project is going to need. And every project will be different. So there's I think no such thing as a wasted meeting. Everyone you meet has something that might help you in some way, or might just, even if it's just a learning experience where you go, oh, I didn't know that, that was really interesting, or that was an interesting take on something that I'm doing that helps me in my next pitch. So definitely for me it's about going with a game plan of what each project's going to need, and trying to bring everything along at the same time. If you just go for one thing and then have to start from scratch, the whole thing just doesn't work.
I think added on to that, talking about budget is really important, because in order to have an idea of what your budget is going to be, you have to have an idea of how you want to make the show. Are you going to do it in 2D or 3D, or a mixture of both, or a mixture of live action? So, what you don't want to do is go and pitch an idea and go, and somebody says, well, how are you going to do this? What's the style going to be? You say, well, I'm not sure yet. What do you think? No, you need to know, is this going to be a 2D show or a 3D show? Do the research, get a rough idea of how much that show would cost, because at least then you've got your starting point.
That's
so, right. Let's say, for example, your budget is £4 million, and you've been lucky enough to get a broadcaster on board, and you say, right, I've got a chunk, now I put the rest of that jigsaw puzzle together, and at least you're starting on the second step, as opposed to saying, great, I've got interest, I actually don't know how much this is going to cost to make.
The other thing is also, if you're not an animation studio yourself and you're making animation, the choice of studio and who you're going to work with creatively is hugely important to anyone you speak to, whether it be a distributor, or a broadcaster, or a co-production partner, because each of those studios or partners brings something special to your project, a particular style, a particular way of doing things, a particular touch to it, and that really helps everyone you're speaking to understand a little bit more about your project by being able to reference how it's going to be made. What kind of people are what else have they done that has particularly been standouts that might influence. Why did you choose that partner? So, for example, we made a project a little while ago, and we were looking to create some designs that we felt were kind of fresh and different and new, and we went to an animation company that has a real track record in game animation. They do a lot of stuff for Microsoft and all these kind of people. And for us, it was really important that the design style for the series was something that felt very gamic, very kind of fresh, very new. And it really made a difference, because we went to market saying, this is what we're doing, and these are the people that made it. And everyone went, oh, right, great, we get it. That sounds really interesting. And I think if we've gone to a different studio, we would have had a very different set of designs. It's the same story, it's the same characters, it's the same kind of world that we're building, but the look and feel of it would have been very different. It may have been better, it may have been worse, we don't know, but it would have changed it. So when you're thinking about how the project is going to be made, it's not just the nuts and bolts. Every person who touches your project has an influence upon it. And that actually also includes distribution companies, because the thing that you have to realise is that the distributors are the ones who are pitching every day and talking to all the broadcasters. And the person who's going to know what kind of shows are in flavour at the moment, what's in fashion, what's happening in the marketplace, are the people who are out there every day, and this is their day job, they're selling programmes. Your job is maybe animating or writing or drawing or whatever it is. And so drawing upon the skills and experience of people who are in the distribution business is absolutely key to your approach.
I just wanted to add one thing to that, if I may, is that through the animation studio, we quite often get offered projects that are quite well developed. So they've got an animation test or a pilot or a script and a Bible. I'll say, well, we did our animation with another UK studio, but they're coming to us and they want us to finance it and produce it with them, but that's quite difficult because the project's already been developed with another UK studio, and that makes it quite difficult for us to then take it on board. So when you're developing a pilot and you're going to that exciting moment of animation and development, you know, choose that studio really, and those creatives really carefully, because if they don't have any capacity to then help you take it to market, then when you go to another animation studio, it makes it a little bit difficult for them to get on board, because it's already been made and developed, you know, without them and with a different creative team.
So Tony, Tony has different hats. He's previously had a production company. He now works in government, helping us all to raise the money and export.
Only part-time, I hasten to add. Two of my colleagues who work full-time, John and Neil, are here. So I am a consultant on a part-time basis, coming from the production sector, if you like, to assist educating government about the sector, and also helping our companies to make more of those contacts and more exports and more business for our industry from the UK.
So I think we'll get to more export later, but keeping on this topic, we've got UK animators, and something that you and I have done is gone around the world. We talk to animation companies elsewhere. How important do you think it is to strategise so you can leverage the market and your idea to work with people from outside the UK?
I think two words, or one word that Helen used about professionalism, cuts right across what Andrew was saying about, you know, everybody keeps talking about the creative, you know, the impulse and creativity being, you know, the nub of everything, and I think it should be. But then you have to apply that professionalism and the research, not only across the creative, but across the whole, as Andrew was saying, the whole piece. And that's why another way of looking at it, another way of approaching what Andrew was saying is, you find very few shows which, in any genre, whether it's animation or across entertainment, drama, which do not involve compromise. And that compromise may be creative compromise, as Jen was saying, between different studios, or it may be that it's business compromise. And it may be, Andrew was talking about a studio in Canada. One of the things that came out earlier from Juliette saying, you know, it's difficult to put a show together with one broadcaster funding it. In the old days at the BBC, that used to be possible. And it wasn't that long ago, really, where if they liked a show, you know, earlier in the terms of trade, you might be able to get the bulk of the budget, and then you'd be looking to put the pieces together. I think most people would say now that probably you need 3, maybe 4 sources of funding. And if you go down that road where you've got different more, you saying more? Yeah. But if you go down that route where you're looking at 3 or 4 different creatives, that's a difficulty, because you know how difficult it is to work with one partner on a creative level, or a distributor who's got a very clear vision of what that creative should be, or a broadcaster. But if you've done your research properly in terms of the broadcasters, you'll know where you're aiming. I was talking to Darren earlier about one of the situations we had some years ago, where it was actually ITV. We were pitching a show which had been commissioned for the 8 to 12 audience, and ZDF, our partner, wanted it for 15-year-olds. We made the show, but boy, were there lots of compromises to make that happen. So the answer to go around the world and see all these people is crucial, from, you know, whether you're the producer, if you're a producer, maybe not quite so important as a writer, unless you're pitching to those different companies around the world. But you may find that sometimes, as Genevieve was saying about the studios, understand completely. If that's just in the UK, where you've got one company coming and having developed it because that was the easiest option to get their show reel or their taster done in the first instance, then coming to another company and saying, will you finance this? Well, 9 times out of 10, those studios will, if they like the project, finance it, but they'll want to do the nuts and bolts of the production as much as they can to bring that business into their studio, because that makes financial sense for them. So Helen's point about being professional, I think you have to be professional across the piece, which means you have to do your research. And that's not only in the UK, it's internationally as well. We all know that Canada has lots of subsidies. And lots of co-productions happen with Canada because they've got the subsidies, and same with some companies in Ireland now. And we're fighting back in the UK because of the tax credits, because of the weak pound against the dollar. It's encouraging a lot of companies to come into the UK and giving us a slightly different leverage to have better deals with people. But you've got to look at the structure, as Andrew was saying, of the production in the context of your passion of the content and the creative project that you want to deliver. And that's where, right from the word go, people will be asking you to compromise. And so therefore, the more research you can do, the more control you'll have over where do I go and how can I get this project to be as close to what we want it to be, which actually delivers the requirements of the people we're making it for.
Absolutely. I think it's, although everyone wants creator-driven shows and wants everyone to be creative and create these amazing new ideas, the job of a broadcaster is to cater to their audience, and they have to serve their audience. They have to make sure that people are going to watch the show and enjoy it, and it's going to meet the criteria that they have. And different broadcasters will have slightly different audiences, different takes, different priorities, and somehow you have to thread that needle and get everyone aligned and make it all work, and still make the show that you're really passionate about and that you really want to create. And it is possible. I mean, that's the main thing to say. The people do this all the time. It's hard work, and you've got to really focus on it. And it does take, as Helen was saying, it does take a little while to get these things in place.
Don't be disheartened.
But I think the other point that Helen made, which I think is key, is if you've got a project that you're passionate about, you know your market, and you know what it is you've got to sell, you can be easily distracted and knocked off route because somebody says something that makes it more suitable for them.
Yeah.
But there are times where you have to say, I can see what they're saying, but maybe that's not the home for this project.
Yeah.
We need to find more appropriate homes. And if there are no more appropriate homes at that point, you might then say, well, maybe is there a way we can make that function? Is there a way we can compromise and still keep the integrity in our content and our passion about it? And so it is at those compromises, but you don't fall over and compromise at the first hurdle. It's as much about bringing those people on board that you can deliver your content to satisfy their requirement. And as we were saying earlier, from the broadcaster's point of view, when Jackie and Darren were saying, understand what they want, and you can slipstream in, but both, I'm sure, will be looking and think they'll know things we don't know as producers pitching in of where they might want to be in 12 months' time. So I'd always personally never go in and say, if there's something that we know, if you know their channel well enough, sometimes you'll be able to pitch something that is slightly off-piste to them, but still might be arguable that could do a job for them if that's where they want to go. And if the answer is no, it's a quick no, as Helen says. I've sat in pitches with some current top executives of our broadcasting channels, and I've seen the person we're pitching to from the broadcaster give us the no, and that moment that you've said not be recognised, and they continue to pitch. And and this is somebody who's a top executive in our industry not that many years ago, and you've just got to know when the whites of their eyes change colour, move on.
It's called de-networking.
Yes. But the other main thing is that even on an international basis, that the guys mentioned it on the first panel, and we've mentioned it, networking. And the networking and the C21, down at the bar and club down at MIP and MIPCOM, great place because they understand they're a broadcast, sort of journal. They understand the importance from their own point of view, but also from our point of view. And those networking opportunities, it really is, as Nico was saying earlier, you never know who you're going to bump into. I mean, we did a show for the BBC some years ago called Test the Nation, the national IQ test and things like that. That came about because for 5 years I knew an ex-Endemol director, company director of Endemol after Endemol had gone away, and I was down at MIPCOM one year, and I got a phone call on the Tuesday afternoon from this guy who I'd never done any business with. We just got to know each other, respected each other, used to meet for coffee on a regular basis, and he said, "When are you going back?" And I said, "Tomorrow. You have to come and have breakfast. I want to introduce you to some guys," and that was the guys who created Test the Nation. And that was completely out of networking. And because he trusted me, they'd taken him on as a consultant, he put us together, and we did, 17 or 18 2.5-hour live shows for the BBC as a result of that networking.
that's back to flexibility,
Yeah.
etc. Just because we're going to be running out of time, because I can see that we've got our next guest online from Canada. I just want to touch on, we've talked about broadcasters and we've touched on SVODs. Helen, how are you seeing things change? How do you think we're going to be working with multiple partners who've got slightly different agendas, slightly different ways of engaging?
From a production point of view, do you mean sort of bring those partners? I mean, we've already talked about the sort of production side of it, where you're looking for partners and you all need to kind of be in agreement, and that's tricky. Managing lots of partners on one project can be, very hard going, and we've been in situations where really you get to a point where you have to say, is it worth it? Is it worth it? Because we can't spend the next 2 years of production in a constant battle with our partners. I mean, the other side of this is that talking about traditional models. One of the things both Oliver and I come from very traditional broadcast backgrounds. Where we always go to the broadcaster first. That's what you've always done. But we all know the landscape of kids consuming content is changing so rapidly. I think at the end of the day, it's still the golden egg is to have your major broadcaster come on board and more than anything, because you want them to have that editorial input, and that's really, really important. You've got to be making a show for somebody. And I think it's quite easy to go, well, we'll just make a show and put it on YouTube. And you could do that, but you're not really making a show for a dedicated audience. That's more of a sort of it builds. It's something that sometimes becomes viral and so on. The opposite to that is that you have to start realizing that the traditional models are not always working anymore, and in order to survive in this business, you have to find different ways of working. And certainly that's something that we've been doing. We've done it on a preschool show that we did have a major broadcaster on board. Jackie was our partner for that. The time came, it wasn't right for the broadcaster anymore. We wanted to do more, and we spent a lot of time and effort raising the money doing the show. So we decided, well, maybe YouTube, we can find a way of still letting that show have a life. And so far, it's worked, and actually what's come out of that is, a new strategy for us, where we're now thinking, okay, could we look at investing in dubs and launching it in other territories where, we've not had a broadcast partner for, any particular reason, but, and doing it that way. So it's, we've got to be open-minded.
Fantastic. Just before we wind up, I just want to ask the obvious question, Tony. Things are changing.
Are they?
Or not. The question that I have to pose to you, as written down a few weeks ago, was, with Brexit on the horizon, what is likely to change?
Well, I said earlier, if we weren't being filmed, I'd have said watch Newsnight.
Yes.
Because the fact is nobody really knows. And it's entirely dependent on what the final solution is, and they're radically different extremes. I'm certainly, as a part-timer working on the creative side, not qualified to talk on things that our government aren't able to communicate to us about. So, because nobody knows what's going to happen next Tuesday in the vote. So the answer is, unfortunately, it's watch this space. Having said that, I think obviously certain things will change, but when you really look at it from our point of view, yes, it's from the animation or from the co-production point of view, rather than the straight sales of end content, product. A lot of our partners out there, our key partners, the US, sort of probably 25% of our business is done with the US. That's probably not going to change. Our tax credits are very incentivizing for people to come here. We don't know what's going to happen with the exchange rates. But all of those are things that we deal with the US anyway. I think that lots of people were coming on to this in the next session are looking at China and other markets around the world. it's really the European market, which we know is so crucial to co-production with some of those other European broadcasters that we need in terms of sometimes making those co-productions happen. But that doesn't change the relationship with Canada, which is another one of our major co-production partners. So it's a difficult one to call. Some things won't change, some things will, but to predict how that will be at the moment is difficult.
Do we have any knowledge with what might happen with the media fund?
Well, I think you've got information on that.
Well, I do, because we were going to do an application for our project that we presented at Cartoon Forum, and we thought now's the time is right. We're going to apply for the TV distribution fund, which is 12.5% of your budget, or to a ceiling of €500,000. We were going to make the application on the deadline to the 15th of December. And then the decision date was in February, and then the release of the funds came after the March deadline, and so then we had a letter, I think from DTI, saying that whatever funds you've been promised by Europe, we will honour. So if you've made an application and you're due some money, which is due to come after the March deadline, then the UK government has committed to honour that money. However, if you haven't made an application, if you're due to make an application in the next few months and the date is after that deadline, there is no guarantee that you will get that, or that the UK government will support it. That's my understanding.
And I'm not sure, but I think there might be an element of, again, what the result is, because if it's a hard Brexit and everything ends there, that's one thing. But if there's a deal, then I think there's likely to be more of a transition period where certain things will still be applicable during that time.
Yeah, sorry, I was talking
in the hard Brexit terms. Yeah, so that's why it's so difficult to call, because at the moment there are two pretty wide extremes.
So what I'm picking up is the key message is we should be out there at these markets, pushing ourselves, getting exports in, and just carrying on making programmes and working on a global scale. We've probably got enough time for one or two questions before we move on to Miles at Kids Screens. Anybody got any questions for the audience?
It's not a question. I was just going to say, actually, one of the biggest things I found, being relatively new-ish, is actually just speak to one another. I've had so much great insight just from other producers, distributors, and there is no silly questions, just ask the questions and you'll find that actually this is everyone's so friendly and welcoming, and it's a really nice community. So that's my own personal opinion anyway, but just ask questions and like you said about networking, like you were just Chris from History Bombs was just standing at a water cooler and met some bigwig from Discovery, and then you introduced me to him, so you just talk to each other, because
That was Kids Screen. Anybody else before we move on? Everybody is hopefully going to be around for drinks afterwards, so you can go up and ask the sort of deeper questions that you might want to ask. So thank you very much to everybody.